Hello everyone, Professor Krizluk here. So today I wanted us to talk about the media and American politics. So when we talk about American politics today, it's almost impossible to separate politics, current events from the media. Most of us have never attended a congressional committee hearing or sit in a Supreme Court hearing or negotiate a foreign policy agreement. Instead, we experience politics indirectly through headlines, short form video clips like TikTok or YouTube Shorts, social media posts, podcasts, and notifications on our phones. That means the media does not just report on politics, it actively shapes political reality and our ideas about what is important and what is going on in the world. So, chapter 8 of our textbook is about understanding how that happens. So, at its most basic level, the media refers to any system of communication that reaches a mass audience. This includes newspapers, like maybe even a printed newspaper that your parents get, or maybe you even subscribe to, online newspapers, television, radio, digital news sites, of course, and social media platforms. An important way that many of us consume media today, social media. But it's important to understand that the media system we live in today is very different from the one that existed just a few decades ago, or even just a decade ago. For most of the 20th century, American media operated under conditions of scarcity. There were limited television networks, a handful of major newspapers, and a relatively unified audiences. News organizations were expected, at least in theory, to act as neutral gatekeepers. They decided what was newsworthy, verified information, and presented it to the public in relatively standardized formats. That world, we know, no longer exists. Today's media environment is defined by abundance. There's more political content available than anyone could possibly consume. News is no longer delivered at fixed times that we sit down in front of our television to consume. It is constant today. The news, the media, our exposure to the media is constant today. It can also be personalized, meaning it can be algorithmically curated. What we are exposed to, an algorithm is giving us that exposure. So today, instead of a shared national conversation, we have overlapping and sometimes disconnected information bubbles. This shift has profound consequences for politics. One of the most important concepts in Chapter 8, which appears in multiple chapters but is a key component of Chapter 8, is agenda setting. The media does not usually tell people what opinions to hold, but it is extremely effective at telling people which issues deserve attention. When an issue dominates headlines in social media feeds, it becomes politically salient. When it disappears from coverage, it oftentimes disappears from public concern. Think about how this plays out in real life. During election cycles, media attention narrows dramatically. Coverage focuses on polling, on debates, campaign strategy, scandals, and personalities. Meanwhile, complex but important topics like administrative rulemaking, local governance, or long-term budget decisions receive little sustained attention. This does not mean those issues don't matter. It means they are not being made visible by the media. Agenda setting helps explain why public concern often spikes around certain issues and fades relatively quickly from others. Crime, immigration, inflation, foreign conflicts, and cultural war issues tend to receive sustained attention because they generate engagement. Other issues, such as infrastructure maintenance or regulatory policy, rarely trend, even though they shape our everyday lives. Closely related to agenda setting is framing. Framing refers to how the media presents an issue, what language is used, what facts are emphasized, what context is provided, and what interpretations are implied. Two outlets can cover the same event and tell very different stories. A protest can be framed as a demand for justice or a breakdown of law and order. A government program can be framed as economic relief or as government overreach. A Supreme Court decision can be framed as protecting constitutional rights or undermining democracy. These framing choices matter because most people do not approach political news as blank slates. Frames interact with existing ideas, values, and partisan attachments. Over time, repeated framing can reinforce worldviews and harden divisions. And the chapter also traces the evolution of media in the United States. For much of the 20th century, media organizations operated, in theory, under norms of objectivity and public service. While those norms were never perfect and often excluded marginalized voices, they were reinforced by regulation, limited competition, and a shared sense of journalistic responsibility. That environment began to change with the rise of cable news. 24-hour news created intense competition for attention. Coverage became faster, more speculative, and more opinion-driven. The goal shift from simply informing to keeping audiences engaged around the clock. So digital media intensified this shift. Online news outlets compete not just with one another, but with entertainment, influencers, and social media platforms. Headlines are written to capture clicks, stories are optimized for sharing, speed often outruns verification. So social media represents the most dramatic transformation. Platforms such as Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube allow political actors to bypass traditional media gatekeepers entirely. Politicians can speak directly to audiences. Activists can mobilize rapidly. Ordinary citizens can go viral. This has democratizing potential. Voices that once struggled to gain attention can now reach millions. Social movements such as Black Lives Matter or the Me Too movement have used social media to shape national conversations. But social media also introduces relatively and rather serious problems. Algorithms prioritize content that generates engagement, which often means emotionally charged, sensational, or misleading material. Misinformation spreads quickly, especially when it confirms existing beliefs. People increasingly inhabit echo chambers where they encounter political information that reinforces what they already think and how they already think the world works. This contributes to polarization, distrust, and a breakdown of shared factual foundations. In such an environment, people consume rapidly different versions of political reality while believing they are well informed. Another major theme of Chapter 8 is the relationship between media and power. Media outlets are not neutral observers. They are institutions with economic initiatives, ownership, structures, and political constraints. Advertising matters, ratings matter, access to resources and access to authorities all matter. Excuse me, sir. Journalists rely on political actors for information. Politicians, in turn, are deeply aware of how media coverage works. Press conferences, sound bites, staged events, and social media posts are designed to influence coverage and public reaction. Modern politics is inseparable from media coverage. So, our chapter also talks about and touches on at least media regulation, particularly the tension between free expression and accountability. The First Amendment provides strong protections for speech and press, limiting the government's ability to regulate content. This protects democratic debate, but it also makes it difficult to address problems like misinformation, disinformation, media consolidation, and platform responsibility. Recent debates over social media regulation, content moderation, and what we've heard so many times is fake news highlights this tension. Who decides what counts as misinformation? What role should private platforms play? When does regulation protect democracy and when does it threaten free speech? These questions do not have easy answers across our thinking about political science. And finally, the chapter asks us to consider the impact of media on democracy itself. On the positive side, media informs citizens, exposes corruption, and connects people to political life. Without media, democratic accountability would be impossible. On a negative side, fragmented media environments can undermine shared facts, reward outrage over deliberation, and turn politics into entertainment. The same media system that enables participation can also distort understanding of the world. So when we think about, does the media strengthen or weaken democracy? And oftentimes political scientists, political commentators will say the honest answer is both. For students and citizens, the key is not to reject media, but to engage with it critically. That means asking where information comes from, how stories are framed, whose voices are amplified, and what incentives shape coverage. It also means recognizing that your own media biases exist and matter. What you click, share, and ignore helps shape the political information environment. So, in a media driven democracy, being an informed citizen is not just about having opinions, it's about understanding how those opinions are shaped and where they come from. Thank you.